to the member for New England, and then I'll come back to the member.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I think that the member for Denison, basically, we got to the point at the right at the end. He said, for these few thousand in the export trade, why do we worry about them? We worry about them, Mr. Speaker, because it's their livelihood. They are actually the ones who are going to become poorer if this motion goes forward, if this motion succeeds. And there seems to be little regard for the people in Western Australia or in the Western districts of New South Wales who have underpinned their price of sheep that has a substantial basis in the live export trade. And we'd also mentioned about myths and lies. Well, let's deal with a few of those myths and lies. The last ship was 0.16 mortalities. 0.16, about 50 I think it was. And this means well in excess of about 99.8% walked off the ship. So that's the truth. The truth is that it's a successful trade. And let's also go to the Awasi Express. We've been doing some digging around here. Who did take that footage on the Awasi Express? Who was the person who took that footage? Well, where was that person? Good, and because the information I've got, it was a person who was actually responsible for looking after the sheep. That's the person who took the footage, and is now residing in Pakistan after receiving about $200,000. So the person who was responsible for looking after them is the one who's made the profit from that going out. If that person was doing their job, we wouldn't have the footage. And this is the sort of issues. These are the myths. These are the lies you're dealing with. This is how this sort of nefarious process of the activist industry works. Now, Mr. Speaker, are we going to reward that even further? Are we going to reward that even further? Why was it on that ship they said, well, in the other areas we didn't have this problem? Now the big thing about it is I listen in respect to the member for Denison. And that's exactly how the debate works around here. They yell and scream, they don't listen with respect. And so as they go on, that's it. There it is, it's right there in front of you. That's who they are. Anyway, so why was it in the other levels of that ship that we didn't have the same problems? These are the questions people were asking. Why was it? Where was the person who was responsible for looking after them? Well, he was the person who took the footage. He was the person who took the footage. And now he sold the footage, he's been paid, and he's living happily in Pakistan. I think he's got in excess of $200,000 for it. So, is this what we're going to premise this motion on? How about we start dealing with it? How about we dispense with the myths and the lies and deal with the truth? How about we say, when are we going to start rewarding a person for their malfeasance? By saying, not only is he going to get $200,000, we're going to shut the whole trade down. We're going to shut the whole trade down. I also go to the member for Denison's speech where he mentioned the word, the Australians hate the trade. All of us hate the trade. Well, we know that is completely incorrect, because I can tell you, for one, I don't. For one, North Queensland doesn't. For one, people in Western Australia don't. For one, the people in southwest Western Australia who rely on this to get a better return back through the farm gate, they don't. I know the Green Shirt Brigade who's out there trying to make sure we maintain agricultural industries, I know they don't. I know that we've been fighting for them, just like when they closed down the live cattle trade and people went broke. And there were people who committed suicide because the value of their place was destroyed, was absolutely destroyed by the reckless actions of those who did not live on their farms, who did not live in their industries, who did not have to deal with the consequences of the actions of this chamber. And we're not going to let that happen again. We're going to stand up for these people. We're going to stand up for these people and make sure that we respect their rights. Now, he doesn't believe in the live sheep trade. The member for Denison Dairy Stamp doesn't believe in the live cattle trade, and I can tell you where it's going because I've heard it from the member for Bendigo. This will go into the transport trade, into the movement of cattle, into the movement of sheep. And then we'll go back to the farm and further impose caveats of the government on how people run their farms. This, of course, is the movement of the government into the private commerce of the rural industry. And we must stand up on behalf of the people of rural industry, because we know the member for Denison won't, we know the Greens won't.
Member for New England resume his seat. The member for Denison on a point of order.
Yes, thank you, Speaker. I suggest that the member for New England speak to the motion.
Yeah, look, the member for Denison can resume his seat. I'll deal with this matter. Look, I did raise this point with the member for Denison, and I did that gently in the interests of the debate. The member for Denison did then say why he thought the matter was urgent, but I don't think the member for Denison, in all good conscience, can now look back at his speech and say that it didn't cover precisely the same sort of issues that the member for New England is. So, if members want me to strictly enforce all of these sorts of things, I'll essentially censor the debate. But I think, the member for Mayo and the member for Denison spoke very broadly. That was their choice. That means we're now debating the question very broadly, and the member for New England may proceed.
So thank you, Mr. Speaker. So the reason that this should not have urgency is because, and with the evidence I've just given, which I've given to the House end, you don't have all the facts. You do not have all the facts. And something as important as the question asked with the Awasi Express, which was the inflammatory proposition that was put forward to drive this agenda as the activist industry always do. Remembering, they don't believe in closing the live sheep trade. They believe in closing the live cattle trade. They believe in following up.
The member for Hunter.
Mr. Speaker, I'll take the interjection. He says it's lies and rubbish.
Look, member for New England will pause for a second. Members are not going to take interjections. The member for Hunter's out of line. If he wants to participate in the debate, he's not going to yell wildly. The member for New England.
Very much, Mr. Speaker. It was the member for Denison himself who, prior to me speaking, said that it would also involve the live cattle trade. It's the member for Denison himself, the seconder of this motion. I say to the member for Hunter, the seconder of this motion, who says it's going to involve the live cattle trade, and yet the member for Hunter is going to support the member for Denison, and therefore by doing concur with his views that the live cattle trade should be shut down. That is exactly where they are going. The Australian people have been down this path before, and I remember when I was the Shadow Minister for Water, being the first minister out on the doorstep after they closed down the live cattle trade, saying this is absolutely the wrong thing to do and it's going to cause massive problems, especially with our relationship with Indonesia, as we are the supplier of protein to the city of Jakarta. And it was. And now everybody looks back and says, oh, that was a terrible idea. Yet the member for Denison has said it's about the live cattle as well. He's not refuting it, and the member for Hunter is now going to concur with his views and support it, thereby so doing supporting the closure of the live cattle trade, and they're back at it again. It didn't take them long. They're back in that space again. So, Mr. Speaker, I say, get all the evidence. Get the evidence. Don't give us a script. Don't give us a somehow conjured up form of selected facts. Find all the facts. Find the person who took that footage on the Awasi Express. I'll tell you what, the people who've come to my office have even given me their names. Find it so you can have a proper discussion about how this issue was constructed. And I say constructed. Constructed for the purpose of creating massive damage to the live sheep export industry. Creating damage in such a way as to shut it down, to inflame views, to create myths and lies. Myths and lies about actually the mortality rates on ships. Myths and lies about exactly where that footage came from. It was not done surreptitiously by someone who sneaked onto the ship. It was done by an employee whose job it was actually to look after the sheep. That was actually their job. They made more money out of not doing their job than out of doing it. And by so doing, create massive damage and a massive problem for the live sheep industry. But I'll tell you what, I'm going to be supporting the live sheep industry because I am sick of being part of a process of making people on the land poorer. That was always what was happening here. Every move was about taking further rights away from people on the land, by taking further income from people on the land. And we've got to stand up for people on the land. We've got to make sure a better return goes through the farm gate. We've got to make sure that the profit that they actually got for some of the first time in a long time, some of them over the last decade, that we maintain that. They have the right to renovate their kitchens. They have the right to go on holidays. These people who work on the land have the same right to make money as other people, and what the member for Denison and his supporters want to do is make them poorer once again.